welcome all to the discussion on the future of clean tech. And we have an amazing panel here for you today. You already heard from a couple of them. But I appreciate everyone being here at 4:30 when it is so beautiful outside. And I recognize a lot of very friendly, very familiar faces. So I hope that all of you who I know will be jumping up and asking questions at the end of this panel. Otherwise, I might be tempted to call on you, Joan. So I had a brief introduction, but I'm Emily Reichert. I'm the CEO of Greentown Labs. We're the largest clean tech incubator in the country now. We support 52 startups, and most of those are building clean technology products, doing especially hardware development products. We have a lab. It's 40,000 square feet, and we're located in Somerville, which is just about 1.5 miles from here. I encourage you, if you haven't already been to Greentown Labs, you definitely need to come and check it out. We are very thankful to MIT and also MIT Startup Exchange and MIT ILP for the focus on energy that has really spurred a whole series of startups over the past, I'd say, 10 years. When MIT decided to focus on energy, have the Energy Initiative, that has created a stream of innovation in this area that's leading to a lot of really interesting startups. And I also think it's very important that MIT has, by exposing all of these students and faculty to the challenges in energy, inspired a whole generation that is going to be interested in solving big global energy and environmental challenges. So the other thing I need to remind you of is that you may tweet during this event. So our Twitter is @MIT_STX, and/or the hashtag is STXEnergy. So what are we going to do today? I'm going to start by giving brief introductions of our panelists. They will be very brief, as in bullet points, because there's nothing worse than, just taking up the entire time with just the introductions. So we'll, especially as some of our panelists, we not only know well, but also they have already spoken. So I'll save a little quick fact for you, for each of you that's already been up here. Then I'm going to ask a few questions to our panelists. So this is going to be a little different in that we're not going to go down the line, and each panelist answers the same question. I'm going to give them targeted questions, and then they can interact. And I don't know. I think that Trond would love it if they yelled at each other, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. So we'll at least try to get some differences of opinion going up here. All right. The final thing will be a Q&A and wrap up. And do I have a timekeeper? Anyone? Anyone? All right. OK, you are the timekeeper, Trond. That is excellent. I'm so glad to hear that, because I was wondering how that was going to work. All right. So I already talked about keeping it lively, audience. But before we get started, how many startups do we have in this room? Excellent. And how many investors? That's good. And if you are part of a corporation that makes over $1 billion a year, raise your hand. And if you are holding up your hand and you're interested in bringing startups into your company, raise your hand. So I think we're all very interested in startups today. And so am I. That's kind of what Greentown Labs is all about, is helping startups. And so when we have our discussion today about clean tech, we're going to look at it through the lens of a startup, and specifically about the challenges that startups face in getting their organizations to scale, meaning getting the technology out into the world where it can really make a difference. So that's going to be our area of focus today. But before we get started on that, what I'd like to talk about is this word, clean tech. So if you're on this coast, clean tech is still kind of cool, right? You guys all came to this panel today, even though it had clean tech in the title. However, I'll be interested to hear from Marianne a little bit about how it's perceived on the West Coast. But before I do, I actually realized I did not introduce my panelists. So let me get to that point first. All right. So who is this Marianne? Well, who is this Marianne? OK. I'm getting there, guys. I'm getting there. OK. So let me start in the middle. Marianne. So Marianne Wu is the managing director for energy investing at GE. She was a partner at Moore Davidow Ventures. And she is really incredibly smart, PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford University. She has tons of experience across being a startup executive, broad exposure to energy landscape, generating energy, storing energy, pretty much everything to do with energy. And she was named one of the top 10 women in Cleantech. So I'll be very interested to hear her opinion on our first question. All right. Then on the end there, Mr. Shaffiq, and we know him well, but I will say something about his mission and why he's here, although you may not know it. I got this out of your bio. His mission, why he's here. He joined Total 6 years ago. And he's here to find novel ideas and technologies across the research community, which of course includes universities like MIT, as well as startups, I would assume, that will lead to breakthroughs in energy, either in production, conservation, and efficiency. So that fits many of our startups here. Materials such as PV, catalysts, and biomaterials, and manufacturing processes. So basically every startup in here, that guy's interested in finding you. All right, Peter Rothstein. So Peter is the president of the Northeast Clean Energy Council. And for those who don't know, NECEC, it's a membership organization that plays a role in developing and supporting clean energy policy in both New England and New York. And they also organize ecosystem-wide events for members, both clean tech companies, large and small. And Peter has been an investor as part of the Flagship Ventures team, who has done a lot of investing in clean tech, and he's been involved in a whole list of startups in the clean tech space, so Mascoma, Planar Energy Devices, ZGen, Novamur, and Boston Power, to name a few. And Judith. So Judith is a new person to the scene up here today. So let me tell everyone about her. So Judith Judson is the commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. So what does that do exactly? So they develop and implement policies and programs aimed at ensuring the adequacy, security, diversity, and cost effectiveness of the Commonwealth's energy supply to create a clean, affordable, and resilient clean energy future. Did I get that mostly right?
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay, cool. So Judith has worked for the organization called Customized Energy Solutions, advising clients on the use of innovative technologies to cost-effectively modernize the U.S. electric grid. She's also got some good startup experience with Beacon Power, which is a flywheel energy storage startup. And you know, she has an MBA from Harvard Business School, so she's like also really smart. So that's Judith Judson. And who do we got left here? Bennett Fisher. So Bennett is a true MIT startup success story. Not like you aren't also, but so I learned about his company when I was at MIT Sloan doing my Sloan Fellows program, because he's one of the classic examples used for the early stage capital course, or at least your company is. So he co-founded Retroficiency, which has the mission to scale energy efficiency in buildings. And this enables utilities and energy service providers to target the right buildings, engage customers with compelling analytics. This Retroficiency has then been acquired, an exit, everyone, an exit, by Ecova, if that's the correct way to say that, which is a leading utility energy efficiency program provider with 50 utilities under management. So that's pretty exciting. And I'll just mention that Retroficiency has been named one of America's most promising social entrepreneurs in 2012, as well as one of the most promising companies in 2014. Last but not least, we've already seen a wonderful presentation from you. One thing I will add to the cool facts about our panelists would be that you have a TED Talk, which we can all go and look at, that you did in 2012, and Donald Sadoway, MIT professor, has been on the Colbert Show. So if you have not seen that segment, I highly advise you go watch that. All right, now back to our panel and our question. So clean tech. And I want to not go down the row, so I'm going to ask different folks to address this in different ways. So again, it's a descriptor that we on the East Coast are happy with. We call ourselves clean tech. You all showed up at this panel today. It had clean tech on the label. But in other parts of the country, clean tech can almost be a dirty word. And when you're looking at investment in clean tech, that's been a hard thing to actually get accomplished if you're a startup over the past several years. I'd say since the 2006, 2007, 2008, everything green is good era. So I'd like to ask our panelists, first, maybe Bennett and Professor Sadoway, about how you go out and pitch your startup, your organization, so Ambri and Retroficiency, in terms of the use of the word clean tech. Do you use it? Is it important to you? Is it something you don't think about? Do you find it investors at all are pushed away from it, excited by it? What are your thoughts on that?
How's everybody doing? I feel horrible saying this, but we don't leverage the word at all. And it's for a couple of reasons. The first is we often don't know what we're kind of walking into and what the temperature is of the other party, right? So sometimes people love the word clean tech, sometimes they don't. The person who liked it one week doesn't like it the next week, right? And so it's just, there's the risk of just not knowing, right? And so, I love that I'm here, I love that I'm a part of clean tech, but I just don't lead with that as the word. The kind of second reason is, when you have kind of a short segment to either engage an investor or engage, a potential client or whatever it is, right? Just saying you're a clean tech company, like what does that really mean, right? Tells you really nothing about your product, it tells you nothing about your business, tells you nothing about your customer set per se, right? So we kind of opt for words like, SaaS, right, where you can get that recurring kind of idea in an investor's head, or data analytics, where they think we at least have one smart person on our team, right? And so, we kind of choose other buzzwords that may be a little bit, kind of catchy, but we tend to stay away just from leading with the word clean tech, personally.
Professor Sadoway, do you have a different opinion? Agree?
No, I think that if I'm talking about metals, I'm talking about producing better quality metal at premium price, and parenthetically, it will be environmentally superior. But I don't refer to the clean tech, and Ambri, of course, is focused on stabilizing today's grid and enabling the integration of intermittent renewables, and I think that's pretty much the way we put it across. I don't like labels.
So Peter, I wonder if you have a perspective on this. So you have a whole organization that, Northeast
now, yeah.
Clean Energy Council. I'm going to get that sometime soon. Underneath your organization, you have the Cleantech Open Northeast that is also running from that, and that is certainly all about clean tech. So tell me how you think about that word, and whether your member companies feel like that's an important descriptor or something that they maybe don't mention.
I think it's a valuable category and way to introduce a sector and a group and a community. So yeah, as you pointed out, Cleantech Open is Northeast, which we run here in this region of the country, is part of the Cleantech Open network, which has been around for about 10 years and has grown to be a recognized accelerator, virtual accelerator and business plan competition all over the U.S., but in some other countries too. So it's a value. In that case, that's a valuable brand, and that's value. And brands are useful for convening when you want to bring together different parties who are looking to figure out how they can work together. But I completely agree. I think with what Bennett and Don said. I mean, when you're talking about an individual company, you got to start by talking about who's your customer and what's the problem and your solution. What makes you better at so you're differentiating yourself. The term clean tech doesn't do any differentiation, but it's a way to gather people together. Because the other piece I'd add to it is, now that we're at the point of the majority of new energy generation that got deployed last year was clean, was renewable. This is not the alternative. This is now becoming mainstream. I don't want to call it mainstream, but this is what energy transition, energy innovation, and new energy is about, and we should be embracing that.
Great. I think, Marianne, I can feel you wanting to say something. So tell us about clean tech from the West Coast perspective, or anything else you'd like to tell us about clean tech.
Yeah, I mean, just maybe jumping off your opening comment, I think on the West Coast, Cleantech is, I don't know if it's tainted, but it's certainly a tired term. And so it's not one that people generally lead with. You know, representing GE, we're an energy company, so we don't really care if you want to pitch as Cleantech. We're certainly interested in that. But I'd say that the overall ecosystem steers away from the word. You know, I think at its height, it was only useful to say, hey, I'm part of a hot sector. You know, now it's not a hot sector, so people don't use it anymore. And I don't think it's descriptive of anything to the point of the comments down the line. So you are a more efficient logistics company. You are a renewable energy company. You're a smart you know, grid modernization company. Those are much more useful terms than clean tech. So I think we've seen that term go away. It does still get used for categorization as the umbrella term, right? For an umbrella of companies, for reporting on sort of macro trends, it still gets used there. And I think we've had a hard time finding different terms. Even at its peak, there was clean tech, green tech, enertech. There was still all these variants, and I don't think we've ever really resolved that problem.
Anyone else on the panel want to add anything?
I can add a comment from an international company, given these are all US based. As a French company, clean tech doesn't translate in French. All right. So firstly, you know, it's a word very focused to the US at this point. For me, you know, the first thing you do when I see investor slide decks from startups is cut all the buzzwords, and is there any substance to it? And really, I come back to what Dawn says is, focus on what's your customer and talk about scale. When you want to play in the energy space, you don't have scale, it's not worth my time. Think about the size of the type of company and the amount of energy we're talking about. Then we'll look at you seriously. But if you're going to talk about clean tech and use buzzwords, there's no interest.
All right. So I think we hear pretty definitively from this panel that clean tech is probably not the first way that you want to describe your startup, but it is an important category for collecting a whole bunch of startups. And today I heard a variety from, I mean, just from the ones that pitched. There were sensor hubs, there was wastewater, solar, ride sharing, materials, energy efficiency. So I think it's a good collector term, but certainly there's a product benefit that kind of rises above any particular buzzword that you may want to address your startup. So something to keep in mind as we go forward with our clean tech panel here today. But you really raised the question that I want to move to next, which is about scale. And how do we think about, I think if there's anything that characterizes the transition that we're facing in energy and in clean technology generally, the big challenge is scale. So how do we get from all of these startups that are sitting in the room and all the ones that are at Greentown Labs and other incubators across the country, how do we get from the university idea to the bench scale, to the prototype, to the testing, to the product that works, and then scale that product? So I think that that's a question that is really the essential one for going forward with clean technology and energy. And so I'd like to, over the next 2 topics, really drill in on that based on our panelists' expertise. So we'll start with energy efficiency. And Bennett, you're going to come to the fore here in just a moment. So I'll give you that warning. So your company actually leads with its mission as an organization is to scale energy efficiency. Can you talk about what that means for energy efficiency technology? How do you do this, and maybe challenges you face along the way? I mean, when people think of energy efficiency, there's lots of different aspects to that, from insulation in your home all the way to sensors and devices. How do you think about scaling in an area like energy efficiency?
Yep, yeah. So it's a good question. So just kind of go back to the bio a little bit. So we do software data analytics for commercial buildings, right? And our whole kind of premise was, when you think about the commercial industry, right, kind of the normal process today is to walk around and, you know, count lights and look at HVAC units and do this process that takes weeks and months to evaluate an opportunity in a building, right? which makes sense if you have 3 buildings, right? But what if you have 1,000 buildings or 100,000 buildings, or if you're a utility and you have 800,000 meters, right? How do you start to think about driving kind of insights that allow you to identify the right building with the right opportunity at the right time, right? And so kind of the way we approached the problem was you can't send people on site, right? And so what can you look at from data from a utility, which is often consumption data? What can you look at from your environment, which is, you know, assessor's data or weather or, you know, other types of external data? And by putting all that together, right, could you approach a situation with a utility and understand how every one of their commercial properties used energy and could improve, right? And so we kind of started that with, you know, that was our kind of problem was we knew that the industry wasn't going to get to where it needed to by kind of banging away at doors one by one. And so we approached it with, like, we had no other choice but to use data to scale the industry. And so that kind of has launched a whole other set of problems, which is, okay, now we're dealing with utilities, right? And we got bought by a utility, right? So, so Ecova is owned by ENGIE, which is the second largest utility in the world. So we have another host of problems, which is, okay, utilities don't, you know, they're not known to be innovative. They're not known for having kind of their data chops together, right? And so, you know, we've seen kind of this, and Peter can speak to this too, right? You know, in my opinion, we've seen technology and analytics and advancements in the industry almost move faster than the data we can get, right? So we're kind of like hindered by being ready to service the industry, but not being able to get the data in a kind of consistent format to where we can actually drive it forward, right? And so that's kind of one of the biggest problems we face day to day is, you know, we can help you, but, you know, you got to kind of help yourself a little bit here too, right? So I don't know.
Michelle, you were nodding. Was there anything that was jumping? Or sorry, Marianne, you were nodding.
Yeah, just a couple things on scale. One is that for efficiency and use, the deployment model matters a lot, right? So I think for startup companies, it's easy to think through product attributes, but when you really want to scale, then it's how do you get installation and deployment, and how's that scalable? I think the other thing I just wanted to pick up on from Professor Sadoway's talk was cost from the get-go, right? When you're thinking through, say, material systems or processes, then cost is just a really critical piece of getting to scale so that you have that market available and thinking of that from the get-go. And then last piece was just a plug for GE, that one of the challenges really of getting to scale is distribution, right? How can you actually move product out and how can you get that through to a large customer set? And that's something that GE and other corporates can help with. So to the extent that there is strategic fit, and Eric Gephardt spoke about this earlier, as GE moves into reinventing the energy landscape, we really want to partner very aggressively with universities and with startups, and we can help you scale those technologies and products.
So Judith, on the topic then of energy efficiency, Massachusetts has been named the most energy efficient state again this year, second only to California. Or sorry, California was second.
California second. We're still number one.
You're still number one in most things that we want to be number one. All right. So I guess, you know, one of your missions at Mass DOER is to ensure deployment of cost-efficient energy technology.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Judith, how do you think about scaling from the regulatory perspective and helping organizations like Bennett's, you know, get their technology out to the world?
Yep.
How do you think about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So one thing I'll just add, following up on those comments, is energy's regulated. Utilities are regulated. The wholesale markets are regulated. It's probably one of the most regulated industries out there, which means you need to be engaging with government, you need to be engaging with regulators, you need to be engaging with policymakers. One of the things we're doing at DOER is we're trying to make sure that we are being innovative. We do recognize that technology is moving fast, and we want to capture that, because if we can capture that, that has benefits to our ratepayers, our customers, our consumers in Massachusetts. So with that, we have energy efficiency programs. They are run through our utilities. We've made huge investments in those. We just came out with our next 3-year plan. But as part of that, we do a term sheet with the utilities, and it identified they need to be thinking about innovation. What we know today to go in the next 3-year plans is not what the world's going to look like 3 years from now, or at least hopefully the world looks differently. We continue to innovate in energy efficiency. So we've held aside budget to make sure that our utilities are continuing to look at innovation. But it does require new companies to come in to meet with the state to introduce themselves to the utility. We do have different programs that are also through the state where we do energy efficiency of state buildings, which is an opportunity. But certainly that is something, coming from the startup world, recognize that that's something I want our utilities looking at. So it does require us to put that as a priority, but then it also requires companies to let us know they're out there, help us connect them with utilities or also go directly with utilities. I'd love to talk more about the data issue that was raised so that we can make sure that we're enabling growth and innovation.
Peter, I see you nodding. Anything to add to that?
The one piece I would add, as we think about energy efficiency and scale, one of the areas of significant innovation is around business models and financing models. And for deeper deployments, for broader deployments, for aggregated deployments of energy efficiency, the kind of things that DOER and the Mass Clean Energy Center is doing, the Green Bank in Connecticut and New York, and the Infrastructure Bank in Rhode Island, they're creating financing mechanisms that can be town-wide, city-wide, to be able to think about how do you retrofit neighborhoods, not just individual buildings. That can impact scale.
Bennett, I want to go back to you and ask about your experience getting a product to scale, or the organization that you have basically started and got off the ground and now have exited. I'm proud when any startup exits, so I'm very excited about that. What has been your experience dealing with the regulatory framework here in Massachusetts?
It's like the hot seat today for me, huh? I'm going to punt this to you very quickly here. So we've had nothing but good things to say about the regulatory framework here. I mean, obviously, in our industry, you need to have a presence in those proceedings and what's happening, and you need to support it, right, and nurture it and help kind of push it in the right direction oftentimes. But, kind of one of our early funders was, Mass CEC, right, and so we had kind of internal support from the state too. So, yeah, I mean, it needs to be a part of kind of the business strategy, right? It's an important component to it. But I don't know if others want to jump in. This is not my strong side here.
I mean, I'll add a point that this goes to what Judith was saying about the 3-year plans in energy efficiency in Massachusetts. That means that there are certain technologies that qualify for incentive support, other technologies that don't. And if you have a new technology that doesn't fit in certain definitions, you don't have that channel to go through the utility energy efficiency programs. You have to be involved in the policy and the regulatory process to have your technology be included. It can feel like a cumbersome process, but it opens up big markets, and you got to invest the time and effort in that.
So I think what I'm pulling out from these comments is, for startups, one of the things to be thinking about, as if you want to actually scale a product, is planting the seeds from a regulatory perspective very early on so that you can get into these programs that will allow you to get your technology out into the world. And I think that that's something that I know the startups I'm surrounded with, but every day, it's something out there that I don't really need to think about right now. It's actually a very important thing to be thinking about early on. And so I think if you're a startup sitting in this audience right now, you should ask yourself, is this a potential barrier to your getting your product to scale? And we've got some nice experts here who might be able to help you think about how to surmount those barriers right here on this panel. So I'd like to jump to another topic now, one that is an area of expertise of several of our panelists, and that would be energy storage. And I'm not going to go into technical detail here because we've already had a wonderful presentation with many numbers and pictures and just the level of things that I remember seeing in my PhD from physical chemistry way back when, but it's maybe something that we will stay at a little different level here today. So I think that one thing I'd like to talk to you about, Professor Sadoway, and I think the startups would be interested in hearing about as well, is as you're taking this technology from a very early stage into market, what are some of the things that the team struggled with? I loved how you mentioned that you really look for, you crossed out expert and you put novice. Are there some particular barriers that you face to getting this technology to commercial scale that having those novices really helped you overcome? Or can you comment on anything about commercialization? What are some of the challenges or barriers?
Well, the challenges are to come up with a finished product. I mean, the thing that we're talking about here is really heavy industry. These are big products, and they have to work. They have to work flawlessly. And I can conceive of an electrochemistry and surround myself with brilliant students who execute on it. But now, to get a product out the door, the customer wants something the size of a 40-foot shipping container with a plus sign and a minus sign on it. And everything inside has to work, the power electronics, battery management system, on and on and on. So where are we going to manufacture this? You can't outsource this. You're doing it for the first time, so then that means now you're involved in manufacturing and robotics and on and on and on. And so to perhaps put a different aspect to the scalability, if you're building something of a product nature, it's not a matter of just crowdsourcing it or putting it at some internet site and seeing somebody just decide to bid on it. And that to me is the big challenge, is putting all of those pieces together. So the obstacles are definitely technical, and the ability to face those technical challenges with people that are unjaded is really important.
So Judith, you've also had the experience at Beacon Power of bringing in energy storage technology to commercialization or being part of that team. Tell us about that process and some of the things that may resonate with what Professor Sadoway just said, or are there other, what else? Tell us the things that aren't the pretty things we're going to read on the website.
Aren't the pretty things, okay. Well, I think as Professor Sadoway said in his earlier talk, the grid was not designed with storage. So it's really the only supply chain out there where you need to generate your product and consume it at the exact same time. And by exact same time, all grid operators send signals to generators to change their output every 2 to 4 seconds, because that's how close the grid needs to be managed. Someone turns off a light bulb, a generator needs to change that much incrementally more. So the challenge, though, is that's the way the grid's designed. So all our markets, our regulatory structures define generation, transmission, delivery. There really isn't a lot of ways to value storage or market constructs. And we worked very hard at Beacon. We were in the that very quick balancing market to open the markets, and a lot of progress has been made. But there's still a tremendous amount of work to be done in order to really get the benefits of storage to market. One of the challenges with storage is that you can have great efficiencies, but by doing that, that means today the business model may be energy arbitrage. You make money by the difference between the very high peak price and the low off-peak price. The challenge with that is if you actually bring on enough storage, you don't have that energy arbitrage opportunity anymore. So the storage almost takes away its own market by the benefits it's bringing. But it is bringing benefits, and there's real value to that, and it's lowering costs to consumers. And that's what we need to do, is look at ways to utilize storage to lower costs, look at storage ways to integrate more renewable resources, add flexibility to the system. But it requires new thinking, and it requires not only the storage industry engaging. Just to make some relatively small changes took about 5 years at Beacon, which progress is still being made. But we're doing a study at the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources in conjunction with the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and we're looking at what is that value. And if you had a system, so we're kind of reverse engineering, if you had a system with storage, how much would you have? What would be beneficial? and then going from there. So that's going to be coming out hopefully in the next few weeks, springtime. And then going from there and saying, well, what policies, what barriers are in place? How do we need to change our thinking in order to better utilize this resource that is here? It's viable. A lot of progress is being made, but there's still not the types of markets that and regulatory structures to really get the full value. So there's work to be done, and look forward to talking more about the results of that when we have it. But it's pretty exciting. It really shows there's a lot of potential for storage.
Professor Sadoway, how do you think about the kind of regulatory picture? Is there anything is there a policy framework out there that seems better in terms of getting your technology to market that you're aware of? I know that you've done some work with Hawaii, for example, and that's in a state where they have put forward, we are going to do this clean energy thing, and they are especially focused on energy storage and large-scale deployment of that. How has that either pushed you in the direction of commercialization? It's been helpful to you?
Well, the Hawaii attraction is it's a place where the pain point is really high. So it comes back to the value proposition. Mm-hmm. It's not about a policy that's going to provide a technology push. It's instead, it's a market pull. They're buying diesel, burning diesel to make electricity for 43 cents a kilowatt hour. And they've got super abundance of wind and sun. But they're intermittent. So if you have storage plus sun, now you've got, on day one, 27 cents a kilowatt hour. This is without any regulatory push, but to the point here is that in some instances, if the market doesn't allow for participation, because let's face it, when a battery is discharging, it's acting as a generator. So do you have a license to generate your own electricity? And in some markets you don't. And you know, on the Jersey Shore, after the time of Superstorm Sandy, there were houses there that had solar panels on their roofs, but the electricity was mandated to go to the grid and then back to the house. The grid goes down, the homeowner's standing there with the solar panel on the roof, but no access to the electrons. So there's an example where regulatory impediments are, they could be removed. And of course the central generators are going to say that, well, but we have to know. We have to know if somebody's sending electricity into the grid. Well, that's a technical problem. We can put a meter on there and it could have a protocol and it would say requesting permission to sell. You know, that's easily done. But anyway, that's getting in the way of progress. Sort of like the first cell phone call was made in 1973, but we didn't get cell phones until the Telecommunications Act was changed, because otherwise it was illegal for anybody to use a device that wasn't hardwired to a landline. So that's a regulatory example.
So lessons to learn there, definitely. But I want to ask one more question about energy storage, and then we're going to do a lightning round. So be prepared. So I just wanted to talk actually to Marianne about GE's focus on energy storage. So you, from what I have read online, there is a very, very big play being made for GE to really go crazy on on grid-scale energy storage. And I guess I'd be also interested in hearing from Shaffiq. How are you thinking about that in terms of where are you going to identify the next technologies that you will need to solve these problems, you know, to solve the technical issues, and how do you plan to make that, you know, a reality? So maybe start with you, Marianne.
Yeah, you know, I think GE plays broadly across the electricity value chain, and as we move to much more distributed resource and much more renewable, we're seeing a mix a shift in the mix, and storage is becoming an important piece in managing that. So Eric already talked about current, and that's a customer-focused, behind-the-meter, customer-focused solution, and storage is part of that mix to manage. He talked about reducing demand with efficiency, shifting with storage, and then optimizing broadly. And so storage is part of the solution as far as GE is concerned on the customer prem. We also have grid businesses, whereas we have much more distributed resource. We think that the grid services and the stabilization provided by storage is very important. So we have storage at the grid scale as well in those businesses. A lot of that work done in the businesses is much more at the system level. So we count on people like Professor Sadoway to develop brand new chemistries that we can bring to the market. And in the businesses, we are doing the overall system design. And I think for storage, a lot of the pieces, how do you tie that into a solution that either your end customer can use or your utility can use, right? So how do you package that as a solution? So a lot of that relates to the overall system design, the software and control, and how do you plug that together. We also do, because we're GE and we're large and we have many pieces, we have a global research center, which is doing some more fundamental research and working with leading universities in terms of what's coming out in terms of new technologies.
Great. Shaffiq?
So I didn't hear anybody talk about the big issue of scaling storage, and that's seasonal storage. If we're truly going to get to a fully renewable energy mix, we have to talk about seasonal storage. A large part of the population does not live in only sunny climates. No one's discussed this. And things like chemical, solar energy, solar to fuel, solar to chemical is going to be a major part of this. If you look at Germany, they're playing very strongly towards electricity to hydrogen. May not be the winner. There's still a lot of question marks. If we're truly going to get to a scalable solar, renewable wind, whatever that be, this question of scale of storage is critical. We invested in Don's work primarily because it had the right economics and potential material supply chain, right, for scaling. Same thing in other technologies. In solar, we've dabbled in, we were trying to learn in storage. We've invested in about 3 or 4 different types of technologies. And the biggest challenge really for us is about scale. And really, when you talk about storage scale at a seasonal level, or at a grid scale level where you really can meet the demands on cloudy days, long sustained storms, and it's a tough challenge, and we're very far from this solution. So no matter what Elon Musk says, we're still very far from a business solution that the average person can get to today. Right?
So
yeah, go ahead.
Just one thought. So, okay, I'm on. I know absolutely zero about storage, so I'm going to take all of like 30 seconds here. But so when you kind of start to think about this, right? So, fast forward 5 or 10 years in our industry, right? You have companies like us who are helping utilities understand at minute, 15-minute increments how every one of their assets use energy or could improve, right? Apply that to solar, apply that to DG, apply that to DR, incorporate storage, right, at scale, right? And like, this is a very different world 10 years from now, right? And how are we going to optimize in real time across all these different assets, right? Like that's where this whole innovation thing is. It gets pretty exciting. I mean, maybe it's not 5 years, but.
So the thing you're most excited about in the future is how do we do this through data?
I think data is leading the charge and the insights behind it, right? And it's slowly making its way through these different segments of clean tech, right? So
absolutely.
That's where we're going.
I do think that's the big trend that we can leverage. I think one of the reasons that we've had a lot of success now in renewables and distributed energy is the cost curves, right? I can't remember who it was, but somebody had it was you, right? That had the cost curves and the plummeting cost of PV, and we've seen some of the same in solar, we've seen some of the same in LED. And so that kind of creates the opportunity that you can proliferate these technologies. And then the question is, how do you enhance that value for the customer? And data and controls and coordination of these increasingly distributed resources, I think, a big piece of it, and certainly a big piece that we believe in.
Just a comment that I haven't heard anybody speak about is, if you look at the challenge of trying to capture a customer, all right, trying to put a solar cell on the roof, trying to put a new technology in the house, put a new technology in a plant, the cost of marketing and trying to capture that customer is a big part of your final price. It's still a very large segment. of your cost. And we haven't talked about that, but the communication message of how you're going to communicate to the average person who does not have the technology know-how is critical. How you convey it in a simple, easy way to understand to capture that customer is going to be critical. The second part is education. How do we get the education to understand the value of the things we're doing, right? At a young age, how do we educate the population? And this is something that, I'm sorry, but until we do that, it's going to be a big problem for scale of energy efficiency to try to get people to adopt things into the housing, even the commercial real estate market. You know, the average person who owns commercial real estate does not understand energy.
Yeah.
So this is a major question mark.
I think that's true. I also think there's, particularly when you talk about going into the building and you're talking about end customer prem, whether it's a commercial building or residential, then you're fundamentally talking about some asset, but probably in this world a connected asset that has data on it and it has some data infrastructure to it. And so going back to your initial question about clean tech, I think one of the problems the term creates is that the companies think of themselves as energy only. And when you're in the building with data and sensors and network, you can probably do things other than just energy. And so there's one piece which is maybe educating the consumer and saying they should care more about energy. There's another piece maybe which is appealing to what they already care about, right? So if they really care about their facility management or their asset management or their business throughput, if they're, you know, a retailer, you can use that infrastructure to deliver those services. So the idea that it has to be energy only, yeah, I think is skewed. And so I think we do need to think, especially as we get into end customers, how do we broaden that value proposition so that all of those benefits are delivered?
So with that, I think I'm going to ask each one of our panelists if you have one message that you want to share with startups, and I wonder if you'll start, Shaffiq, about what they need to do to get between where they are today and go to scale, go to commercialization.
Well,
what would that one thing be? You have one sentence.
I think the key thing is focus. Be clear about what you really have the expertise in and leverage that and take advantage of that. The biggest thing I see is people getting too spread out, too spread thin, trying to do everything for everyone.
Really understand your customer and what value you're delivering to your customer.
I think I'd add to the customer side understanding your potential channels and partnerships, and what kind of systems you'd be integrating it with if you chose one channel versus another.
I'll build on that and say, really understand your policymaker and and recognize that in the energy sector, which is regulated and has a lot of public policy around it, being able to describe your technology in a way that's understandable and really gets at that benefit. If you can do something that's lower cost, reduces emissions, has a benefit to consumers, highlight that, lead with that message, and then talk about how great your technology is, because you'll lose everyone if you just start with the technology. Talk about what it does for residents and businesses.
Yeah, I'll expand on that. It's really just being able to quantify your value prop, right? And that to me is it's way too easy to walk in and say I have the next best widget, or I help scale energy efficient commercial buildings, right? But like, who cares? Why do they care? By how much, right? Until you can get to that like precise, like here's how I can help and I can show that to a customer, right? It doesn't really mean anything.
My advice to a startup is to think about what is the shortest distance between where you are and revenue stream, because the longer you have to go with somebody else's money, the longer you'll have to keep selling away equity. And so it might not be the best product, it may not be the product that you were most proud of, but if it starts the revenue flowing, then it'll ensure the longevity of the company.
Great. So all good pieces of advice, and I'd advise all startups in the room to be taking notes. And with that, I'd like to turn us to questions. So, we got one in the back already.
Please wait for me.
Wait for Tron, he's got the microphone.
Matt Lazarevich from Helix Power.
I was a CTO at Beacon at the same time Judith was there, and one of the things that everybody talked about is how to get the product to market as fast as possible. One of the things that Judith did with working with FERC was to get the cycle time to get to a FERC order or to get to a FERC response of some kind down from 2 years down to about, what was it, 8 months or something, or 6 months. What that is, that represented a change from 2 years down to 6 months, and that was and what's your burn rate of a small company trying to get product out to market. That was the single biggest thing. That was the help to get a product out on the street. So just kind of thought, just a thought process. It's not just the technology, how to get there quicker. We have to. Everybody's got to pitch in.
Great. Do we have another question? Wow, lots of questions. All right, gentleman in the front.
Yeah, I have a question. I guess it's more for GE. I see there's a trade-off between storage and transmission, especially on the East Coast. There's enough sun to the west of the U.S. California's got its own problem because it's in the Pacific Ocean. There's no more sun there. But how do you see the trade-off between transmission and storage?
You know, I'm going to be outside of my depth very quickly, so I might call on Eric to help out here. I think the other piece I'd throw in is load management, right? So storage, load management, and transmission, they're all related. I think at this state of the market, I think it's kind of all of the above, that we deploy all of them, especially as there are different circumstances call on a different mix, right, in terms of what's available, what kind of grid transmission capability is available on those sites. I think in the main, storage is still very early in adoption, and so is mainly looking for congested opportunities today. And so, you know, I think we're still establishing what the right overall mix between storage, transmission, and load management is. Good.
You want me to go ahead? You go ahead. Yes. So, can you hear me? So I'm like Don, I'm a contrarian here. And when I hear unanimous opinions, my antennas start twitching. And I think that the first set of comments, we kind of blew Cleantech away a little too fast. If we're talking about talking to investors, well, you're a dancing monkey, so you got to say whatever they want to hear. But in reality, there is something that is Cleantech or Greentech or sustainable tech or whatever. So I think that to say, no, that's not important, it's kind of not quite right. Because I think most of the people in this room are driven by clean or green or sustainable when they get into startups and stuff like that. And I can almost guarantee you that there's no startup that's going to get any money if it pollutes more than with the technology that exists now. So there is a theme. And I think there's a very important theme. And yeah, to investors, we can say, okay. But to the rest of the world, this is clean tech or something else.
Go ahead, Peter.
I don't think I don't think what I said or what this group said was putting down the term clean tech or saying. I think we were just saying it is good as a term that describes an aggregated sector and an aggregated set of technologies. But I mean, if I look at the companies who are participating in Cleantech Open or our Cleantech Navigate program, we say, well, how many of them are in building technologies, in power generation, in energy storage, in water, in efficiency, in transportation, in sectors where you can think about the specific application. But they are under a category. I think clean tech is a category. It just doesn't say enough by itself.
And I think, so my comment was which was probably the most negative on it, and you set me up for that, was as a marketing label, I think clean tech has limited utility. As a category and a descriptor of a category, right? As a descriptor of a category, I think it does have use. So I think there's slightly different labels to purposes.
And I had the dancing monkey comment.
And running the largest clean tech incubator in the United States, I agree.
Yeah, I'd add one other quick thing on sort of terminology. It's So we're in an era right now, I think post COP21, where there's a lot of discussion going on among the financial community about how do we scale capital coming into this space. And I'm hearing different terms. I'm tending not to hear clean tech. I'm tending to hear sustainability investing, which is embracing clean energy and having things that are cleaner. But there are multiple attributes of sustainability besides just the emission side of it. And I think that's a healthy part of that's a healthy conversation to be in.
Good. Question in the back?
Yeah, okay. We all know that innovation is great and startup it's exciting, but on the other hand, we all know that this is a risky business. I mean, most of the early stage innovations don't live till the commercial stage to provide a product or commercial process. Particularly so in the energy sector. We've seen that in the past, let's say, 10 years. With biofuel, clean tech, you talk about the name, particularly biofuel was pretty bad track record. So the question is particularly from the investment side, how did you manage that process and reduce that risk? Because your money, the company give you is not unlimited, and your company certainly has a pressure for you to produce. How did you manage that process, philosophy or tactic-wise?
Shaffiq?
So the first thing is, if you take a view of ROI and you take a view of short-term return, you're going to fail as a big investor. All right? We're talking about energy scale that, as I mentioned before. Biotech, yeah, going straight to biofuels, there was a lot of hype and people kind of cut a lot of their teeth on it and lost a lot of their money on it, right? We also invested heavily in biotech, probably early before the hype curve really took off. But still, the ability to change and pivot and go after other materials out of the biotech is kind of how we pursued it. The other thing is, though, is it's about technology. It's about how do you gather information, know-how that you don't have inside your company. And we're investing through venture capital, through direct investment in companies. It's about how do we bring competencies, expertise in the energy sector that we don't have inside the company to determine, is that a future area of our business? Is that something we should be investing more heavily? Is that an area where we should really have internal R&D? We invested first in biotech, and then we built our biotech team. Right? We started out with small investments trying to learn before really putting a lot of effort into building a whole R&D organization. So I don't view it as the way you say it. As a big company, I view it as kind of a smart way to use your money to learn quickly.
Okay, and one final question?
This is kind of building on that, I think. I'm curious from the large corporations and the group of experience working with startups about your opinion on this other side of the fence. So we've talked a lot about how there's a lot of symbiosis in having large corporations and startups work together, but to be frank, the people in those organizations usually have very different perspectives on how to get things done, and they sometimes are like oil and water. The startup is worried that the large corporation is going to sit down and flatten you one of these days, and the large corporation is probably worried that we're going to fritter away money on crazy ideas. What's sort of the one thing you've learned about how you have to work with startups differently from a joint venture with a large corporation that you're collaborating with, or a large internal project where you're trying to get things done? What's been different in how you have to work with people?
Marianne, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? So it's easy. Big corporations say all the time, oh, we want to work with innovators, and culturally, maybe that's not how their processes are wired. I think the key, so it's very different, right, for a corporation to work with a small company. I think the key to success there is actually finding those individuals that understand it's different and want to embark on something that is different, and having a very focused deliverable so that there is a very clear shared alignment in terms of what you're trying to get done, and then everybody can rally around that. And what you're going to need is the corporation to change some of their standard operating procedure, right? And as long as they have a very clear shared incentive of what they're trying to do, and you have that right match in terms of who your counterparty is, then you can get there. But if you don't get those alignments and you don't have the personality that wants to do it, then the big corporate's going to get in the way.
just to comment, something that we've learned, and it's a different model than most companies, large companies have done, is that we've actually put people in the startup company. Our Total funded people. So Gevo, for example, Novagy, for example, here in Boston, we put 3 people in with Greg Stephanopoulos' startup and helped develop the biotech company. And now we own the company fully. With Ambri, unfortunately, we couldn't figure out how to get somebody actually in the company, but we still had a Total person sitting in Don's lab until last week, full time through the entire process of the R&D through the startup and learning. Same thing with Amris. We have about 10 people sitting, 5 people sitting with Amris in the startup, trying to help the technology evolve and grow so that it has direct relevance to us. And we build the competencies to know how best to leverage that know-how. So it's not about trying to take over the startup. It's about how do we build the competencies, know-how, and grab it from you to best use it, you as a customer or as a supplier for us, right?
Great. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap it there, but I love the idea of the corporate infiltrating the startup, because we always talk about the startups infiltrating the corporate and trying to make our way to the right person. So I want to thank the panelists, and if we could give them a round of applause. Great panel.
And on my side, I just want to thank the moderator and all of the speakers today. And just to say this, that this reminds me of a sticker that's on one of the MIT's doors, probably on more than one of them. So there's obviously one door, and then there's a revolving door, and there's a appropriately green sticker on one of them saying something like "Don't waste energy." And then some very smart undergrad who probably took Don's class says something to the effect of, energy can't be wasted. So there's always a formula here. So, but I'm saying this because this is not an event that you have attended. This is actually a process. So similar to energy, it can't be, you can't just contain this into an event. STEX is a process. Most of the people you've heard speak here, who are involved here, they're part of a process. So, whether it's input or output, whether it's efficient or not, these people are going to be around. So they're going to kind of morph around in various forms, just like energy morphs around. But you can't get rid of us, and you should use us efficiently. Thank you very much.